What's happening, guys? It's Dill's Tech Show here, and I'm going to be talking about the RX6500xt. I haven't had my hands on it yet, so I don't know one-to-one specs, but I've watched, Paul's Hardware Unboxed, and Linus Tech Tips. I've watched all the major news outlets, and it's pretty apparent what they're saying. Comparatively, this card is underwhelming, underperforming in a lot of areas, especially on PCs that are not PCIe Gen 4 supported, because it's at a lower bandwidth. It's only got 4 gigs of VRAM. It's only on a 64-bit bus. It is using a lot less power, almost 75 watts. It almost could draw every single watt from the PCI Express slot. But like I said, this is a card that is meant to replace GPUs that are GTX 970s, RX 480s, 5 to 6 year old GPUs at this point. Don't want to spend the mass amounts of money, though the performance is exactly the same. Although it's just all over the place in terms of specs, and it's pretty much a little bit better performing than the RX 580 in a lot of games, but also ties up at the same time. It does outperform the 1660, so I guess that's a good thing. But that's the thing is, do you really want to pay $200 or even $250 to $275 depending on what kind of model you get? I'll probably end up getting an Asus model or an XFX if it's at a right price. Although this kind of makes me want to wait for the 3050 and see if it's actually going to be at its $259, which probably not. Basically, it'll probably be, I imagine these 3050s being about 20% faster than the RX 6500xt. I imagine it being about almost 1660 performance or close around to it, a little bit lower, a little bit above. But the 1660, when I bought my RX 6600, was at the same price I bought an 6600xt, which is kind of messed up. Micro Centers like that sometimes. But if you could find the 6600 and pay the $100 more, if it's available at MSRP, I would definitely go that route instead of going for the 6500xt. Although that's kind of the ultimatum, whether or not you want to go a little bit more. It's got more VRAM. It's got 8 gigs. You could mine on it. You could idle mine if you really wanted to idle mine on it. It does about, I think, 28, maybe 30 mega hash, depending on what you're doing. I think I did ETH mine, and the 6600xt was doing 32, and the 6600 was doing about 28. So, I mean, they're not bad for mining, but they're pretty much RX 480, 4 gig. Basically, RX 570 mining performance, really. It's pretty much all that. It's on a smaller node, 6 nanometer. It's a little bit smaller than, I think, 7 is what they were doing for the RX 6600XTs and stuff. It's a half of what a 6600XT is, and it's still yielding decent performance. It's clocking really high. Gamers Nexus and Linus Tech Tips was getting about 69 or almost 3 gigahertz on this card. I'm only imagining how much you could really push it, but then, like I said, if you're only using if it was a Gen 5 PCIe lane, I think it would even have better bandwidth on Alder Lake. But right now, I don't have the way to test that, and I'm not getting my card till Friday. It's on its way here, but like I said, it's going to be a very interesting discussion. It's going to make the 3050 look even better because it's going to outperform this card because of the higher VRAM, DLSS, and better ray tracing support. The ray tracing on this card, obviously it's a 4 gig model. It's going to be terrible. It's not going to be good. And no one was expecting ray tracing to be on a 4 gig card. It's very interesting, though. I want to see. I think this card is going to be great for people that want to use FSR or even RSR when that comes out, if people aren't aware of that. RSR is basically FSR, but it's available in every game. And FSR is basically, it's going to downscale your game's graphics. It's going to play it at 720p, and an algorithm is going to upscale it to 1080p. It's basically what the consoles have been doing for a long time. Basically, Xbox One X, where it downscales it to 1080p and then upscales it to 4K, stuff like that. Yeah, so it's using an upscaling It's basically an scaling algorithm. So say if you want to play in 1440p, you're playing in 1080, and it's going from 1080p resolution. Say you get 160 frames at 1080p, it's upscaling it so you get maybe 25 to 30% performance for free just for doing nothing, and the game looks just as good as 1440p. There's some ghosting and stuff like that, but if you're playing it and not really trying to spot out things, it's pretty good. I think FSR is pretty well. I guess NVIDIA is also working on this with their new GPU DLSS, where it's allowed it to be in any game, which although I don't really believe that necessarily. FSR I can see being a very good tool to use, but I don't think DLSS is at the right state for that. But we'll have to just wait and see. Right now, it's looking good for AMD, but at the same, kind of getting review bombed. Basically saying, if this GPU was $200, the RX580 is, $200 as well. The problem is that, they're trying to push out the car. The shipping costs are more. If you looked at the street prices of these RX580s, it's not going for that price. Even the 4 gigs are going for above $300. So realistically, it's not really an apples to apples comparison. I don't think that's what the reviewers kind of aren't getting. Maybe, I think Hardware Unboxed probably did it best, but I just think that that's one thing they're not really understanding is that street prices of these cards, you can sell a GTX 970 on eBay for like $225. You can buy these cards at actual $225 at MSRP. I did see the prices on Micro Center, and I'll even check them right now. Look up the RX6500xt, and they only had the ASRock AMD 6500, and yeah, $259.99. So pretty much had MSRP, I guess, $60 for the card. And that's also one thing. It's only got the one display port, one HDMI. That is pretty sad that it is, $259. I kind of expected it to be a little bit more, to be honest. But, that's the one thing about Micro Center is that even if you look up the 6600 and look at some 6600 prices, XT is $539, and the Power Color $499. The cheapest 6600 $469. 6600 XT $559. You're not going to get the prices that you're going to be getting with any of these cards. We even look up the 6600 XT, even though it's probably not going to show up anything. Do the 6600 XT $599, $539, $559. But if you really consider that the 6500 XT is performing the 1660, let's look at the 1660s on Micro Center. Oh, there's not even going to show you the 1660 Super. Wow. Maybe they finally got rid of those damn cards. They probably were like, these things are never going to sell anymore. They had loads of these at Micro Center back in the day, and I'm kind of surprised that they got rid of some. But relatively speaking, it's better than buying a very old Quadro, a T400 for fucking $189, or buying a GT730 for $139, or even buying an RX550 for $229. That is not what you should do. That's 100% guaranteed, and you should not do that. Then we got some 6500 XTs, but they're the Gigabyte AMD models, and they are $299. You have a Power Color for Power Color 1650 for $199. It's a one-fan model, pretty bare bones, but you can pretty much get it. I'm assuming they probably have these in stock. I would assume these are flying off the shelves. Although one fans wouldn't probably be that bad, honestly. A Power Color like that. That's probably the one I would get, honestly, would be the super cheap model, because it would just be for testing. It wouldn't be for anything super crazy. I wish they would up the fucking VRAM. I think that's probably its biggest problem. But like I said, the Power Color, if I have to get it, it's $269.99. But that's what I'm saying. This is actually going to be available around MSRP, except for a triple fan cooler for this card is unnecessary. They'll do RX590 or RX580 gaming performance for $200. That's what you got to remember. And if you think that some of these cards are being sold for $300, $100 over the MSRP, imagine what Nvidia is going to do with their 3050. They're saying $259. Why not sell it? They're going to have a card for $350 and be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's what the freaking RTX 3060 is supposed to cost, $299, right? What's the MSRP of 3060? Realistically, that's one thing I would have to just dictate, is that these cards are just underperforming, but they're budget oriented. The 3050 is going to outperform the 6600 or 6500 XT. I'd say it's close, even going to be close to the 6600 XT and 6600. But the problem is that they're not going to be available for that price. Do you think they're going to be a price? If that was the case, the 3070 the 3070 Ti I would have bought would have been $799, and instead I paid $899 for my GPU, which isn't really that bad considering, but it's still a lot of money for just a single component in your computer. Now, I've been very happy with my 3070 Ti performance, but the problem is that realistically I could have bought out a 6600 XT, which I did, and pretty much got somewhat of the same performance, but for less money. I would have spent half, and it would have been a little bit more happier. That's the state of the GPU market right now, is that it's best when you consider the actual cost of the GPU. $200 sounds fine, but $300 for a card with 4 gigs you're basically paying $300 for an RX580 with 4 gigs. That's basically what you got to remember. But the problem is, you can buy a used RX580 for $300 right now. It's kind of ruining the segmentation of even used GPUs, because now people that have an RX580 are like, I have a brand new $300 GPU, but it's not new. It's a 5-year-old card. That's the problem. So I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. But I think people are kind of missing the nature of what the 6500 is all about, is that it's a budget-oriented card. It's going to perform decently well at the specs that you're not really expecting. And some people were like, oh yeah, this is the saving grace. This is just for budget-oriented gamers that have a decent newer system with PCIe 4.0 and can use the bandwidth. The 3.0 is tanking, obviously. And we'll have to go more detailed into that in my review coming soon. Like I said, stay tuned. I would say probably Sunday we'll have the full review. Friday we'll have the unboxing, looking at the card that I bought, seeing how much I spent, and everything else. So guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later.